Basically for a living, here comes Jerry Boise back at you with another YouTube video, and in this week's video we're going to be going over the biblically correct angels due to the fact that it's Easter, and I thought, nah, this would be a fun video. So before anything, please subscribe. You can do that by hitting down the button, but anyway, let's get right into the video. So when we're first, I guess, introduced to the different types of angels, the one angel that commonly, I guess, appears that everybody thinks about are the Malik. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it, which those are your stereotypical angels that look like human beings that do, I guess, awesome stuff in the Bible, which, let's be honest, half the stuff's like messed up that they do, like, kill lots and lots of people. But anyway, those angels are the third tier. Um, in the Bible, the angels, I guess, are separated into different orders. There's four. There's the cherub, the ones I pronounced, the Malik, the Sephaim, and the Orphim, which I am having a hard time pronouncing those words. The Malik tend to go on like one of the lowest tiers, with that being the third tier, and then the lowest tier being the cherubs. And that's actually going to be the angel that we're going to kind of start with. We aren't necessarily going to be reacting to the third tier because that's the one we're kind of familiar with, but we're going to go over these wonderful other tiers. But anyway, so let's start with the cherub. So the cherub is essentially, they're the ones that guard the Garden of Eden from human beings. And the way in which the Bible describes them is something in which I describe as essentially the Backyardigans creators decided to drop LSD and pretty much had a fever dream, because when we're first introduced to these things, it's kind of weird how they're described. First description coming from the book of Ezekiel, and that is, these beings have four faces, with that being a lion, an ox, a human, and an eagle. And they have arms and legs, and they have wings that covers their arm and legs, and they float around. Which, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to know what the heck those people are having to get that, because holy crap, that's crazy. And one thing I also find really, really interesting about these angels in particular is they're prime examples of the ways in which Christianity basically saw their audience, or the people that they were, shoving this theology down their throat, and pretty much, I guess, take things from their culture and put it into Christianity to make it more palatable towards these people. Because, when we think of the cherubim or the cherub nowadays, we don't think of these freaks of nature. We think of like little angels that are like babies. Something that very much resembles, Cupid, and I guess different things in some of the Roman and, Greek, I guess, pantheon, if that's correct. If there's any pagans, please correct me on that. But it's a prime example of how they essentially take different aspects of cultures and they rip them off, and they, put it in their theology. And then, when you also think about it too, it would make sense, in the original interpretation, that these things are very, very similar to, I guess, some of the things that are found in Babylonian mythology and different, well, not mythology, but, different things with Babylon, the religion, like Sumerians and whatnot, with one of the main things being how, when you look at this description and you look at some of the statues that were found in some of these, Sumerian temples, it's almost like pretty accurately portrayed, with the exception of, I guess, the ways in which human, the whole human part of it is, put in. But anyway, so that's, I guess, the first freak of nature that we find in the Bible. The second angel that is completely batshit crazy are the seraphim, which the best way in which I tend to describe these angels are half-baked attempts at trying to put in a weird creature into the Bible. And the way in which they are described kind of like gives off that feeling. When we're first, I guess, described to these in the second order of angels, they're pretty much just floating heads with wings. With that being, they have 3 sets of wings, 2 of which are to cover their arms, 2 of which are to cover their legs, and then 1 set is flying. One would actually think that these things would, be used to, like, I guess, scare people away from heaven. But yeah, no. Essentially what they're used for is they're God's hype men. Because what they do is they fly around God and his throne, and they sing holy, holy, holy. And also they do it like within unison, with his steps. So yeah, that's like literally what these things are, is they're just his hype men. Which I also find it interesting too, that they're like the second, in the order, because they're not really that special. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if God's like, hey, what are these things floating, and like kind of like, treats them like flies. Because really that's, what they are. They, instead of going biz, they go holy, holy, holy. And overall too, it's a kind of a little interesting bit, because it's almost like Lovecraftian horror in a way, because this is something that I guess Lovecraft would, write about. Floating heads with wings. Which, like, overall, actually, when you do think about it, Lovecraftian horror does have, like, some forms of the Bible in it with all this weird stuff. Like, just imagine, what if, like, in ancient times they had a genre, of books that we didn't know about, called something horror, and really what it was just Lovecraftian horror set for the time, and one of their bestsellers was the Bible. Because when you think about it, it really does sound a lot like Lovecraftian horror. And when you look at the way in which some people, I guess, think that this angel came about, they think it originated with the ancient Egyptians with a flying serpent, which I guess would make sense, as said, given the proximity to, Egypt, where, where the Bible was written. And then also when you look at their name, it tends to originate with like snake origins, and then just overall, different aspects of it, which now brings us to the final angel, which is batshit crazy. And if anything, I think with this angel, this really would make people question the Bible, especially if they preach about this in church, because it's so batshit crazy. And essentially what this angel is it's a floating ring with eyes. And flames. That's like literally what it is. It's a floating ring with eyes, which that makes no fucking sense. And then to make things even more insufferable and just make no sense, these angels are in charge of guarding God's throne, which that's BS, because if God's so awesome, why does he need like floating rings with eyes to guard his throne? That literally makes no fucking sense. Because you would think if God was like awesome enough, he could like literally just guard his throne by like just snapping his fingers or some stuff. Now let's get into what some people have thought of as the origins of these angels. The first one is that these are UFOs, which, once again, that makes no fucking sense. Because when you look at how these things are described, that's not really how UFOs are described. And once again, it falls into the whole stereotypical thing of the New Age movement, where instantly, something like batshit crazy happens and they instantly blame it on aliens, or they blame it on something that's like all powerful or some weird stuff. The second way, which makes a little bit more sense, is that the person who had the vision, because that's where these things originated from, was a fucking vision. He was pretty much popped LSD or some like ancient equivalent of the stuff, and he had these visions, and then he wrote it down. Um, or what it could have been is it could have been like a seizure or something that caused him to hallucinate, which would make sense. Um, and then there's the last interpretation, which to me probably makes way more sense, and that is that these things are just a metaphor. Um, but the thing is, though, if these things are metaphors, um, that would literally make the whole entire Bible just one big metaphor, and pretty much just bullshit that makes no sense. Um, because it like literally would invalidate the whole thing with these people that interpreted the Bible like literally. Like for example, the people who believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old and started with Adam and Eve. Guess what? Their story would become null and void because these things were proven to be a metaphor. So that would be proven a metaphor. So in other words, it would like I guess make Graham's Ark, museum thing complete bullshit, and just it would pretty much prove these people of what they are, which is like charlatans pretty much. Um, and also the reason why I think that this is a metaphor is because of just how I guess we treat literature today, which you know people like do metaphors like this all the time with different things. Um, and then also when you think about it, if we have authors today who I guess have deeper meanings with different stuff. I guess back then they could have written this stuff down, having it mean something, but you know, mean something more than what they just put it down as. And then what ends up happening is the whole meaning has gone lost in time, and then like now we're at a point where people actually think like this is real. Which I kind of want to bring up the fact too is, when you're at church, they really don't ever bring up these other three angels that much. Um, and I find myself wondering why, because when you think about it, if you try to sell people like these literal angels, people would probably be like, "Yo, this is batshit crazy." Like maybe the rest of the Bible's batshit crazy. They're trying to make it to where it's more palatable for people, so then this way they'll join the religion. And you see this also with like a lot of different aspects of the Bible and how when you go to church they don't necessarily teach the whole thing, or I guess they kind of expect a person to be almost ignorant of it and actually like not read. But once again, when you actually read it, you end up like realizing, hey, this is like all bullshit. Um, and if anything, I think like one of the main reasons why I essentially became an atheist was because of this. And overall, when I look at world history, it just doesn't necessarily align with the Bible that much. Like for example, if we're going by the Bible, the Earth's 6,000 years old. Well, hey, guess what? I've seen sturgeon, and sturgeon, which is like an ancient fish, are actually way older than 6,000 years old. Like they were around during the fucking dinosaurs. Or, going back to the whole world history aspect, that is, I think one could easily make an argument, and please, everybody could like correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if the Earth was 6,000 years old and it started with Adam and Eve, um, wouldn't that make Adam and Eve the first Christians, which in turn would make Christianity the world's oldest religion, with that being like 6,000 years, right? But when we look at, history today and history that's actually been proven, most people actually think the world's oldest religion is Hinduism, which is 5,000 years old, roughly. And once again, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. So, once again, it doesn't necessarily align with how world history works. And if anything, a good majority of like Abrahamic religions are actually really, really young compared to the other world's religions that are out there. And not to mention the fact that with Christianity, you kind of can see exactly how it like originated from, and also how it I guess appeared in world history. Whereas if the Bible was true, we would see Christianity like almost like everywhere almost. It would have essentially just always been there, which it really hasn't. Um, like, for example, you know, if the whole thing with the ark happened, right? Noah's Ark. Um, that would make Noah and his family the like world's last Christians. So if they're the only people who are like I guess around, um, and they procreated and whatnot, and I guess they taught all their kids Christianity. Um, why isn't the world like always was Christian? Like how would all these other religions I guess form? As a direct result of that. Because it would make sense that you know they would stay Christian because like there's proof because there was a gigantic fucking flood. Like, hey, guess what? There was this flood because we pissed off God. Hey, let's like stick with believing in that. Um, why would they, see I guess all this evidence that you can prove and be like, hey, guess what? I'm gonna like start my own religion. Like I'm gonna become like a Hindu or something like that. Um, it just makes no sense with how world history works. And then once again, if you really want an example of somebody who I would highly recommend watching Digital Hammurabi. They kind of go over some of this stuff. But anyway, thanks again for watching. Come back next week for another video. Hope you guys are doing good. Please remember, like, subscribe, and come back for more awesomeness next week.